The Trireme. The Trireme was the apex predator of the ancient Mediterranean, and its weapon was not armor or artillery. Its weapon was speed. A narrow 121-foot warship propelled by 3 stacked banks of oars, manned by 170 rowers. It barely displaced 44 tons while generating enough speed to punch through the hull of any vessel afloat. At full sprint, a trireme could reach 9 knots. The primary weapon was a bronze-sheathed ram bolted to the prow at or below the waterline, designed to puncture and rupture the widest possible length of an enemy hull on impact. Combat required the precision of a surgeon. Both attack patterns demanded the same thing: acceleration, hard turns, and 170 oarsmen acting as a single organism. The helmsman made the kill. At the Battle of Salamis in 480 BC, an outnumbered Greek fleet of roughly 370 triremes lured a Persian armada of perhaps 600 to 800 ships into narrow straits where numbers meant nothing and maneuverability was everything. The confined water negated Persian numerical advantage. Greek triremes rammed at will, shattering hulls and leaving the water full of wreckage. The Persian fleet lost hundreds of ships in a single day. The deadliest knife in the water got replaced by a floating fortress, because it is a lot easier to build a bigger ship than a better crew. The Dromon. The fire burned on water. The Dromon carried that fire, and that detail alone was enough to end entire fleets. Of the Byzantine Empire from roughly the 6th to the 12th century, a fast orange-sail galley, approximately 98 to 105 feet long, crewed by around 200 rowers and marines, armored the ram, catapults, and archers. But none of those features made the Dromon singular. What made it singular was the bronze siphon mounted beneath its forward forecastle. Greek fire, hygron pier, meaning liquid fire, was a flammable compound whose precise formula the Byzantine state classified as a state secret for more than 4 centuries. What is documented is what it did. It burned on the surface of water. It could not be extinguished by water and reportedly intensified when water was thrown on it. Sand, vinegar, and old urine were among the few substances that could suppress it. Water made it worse. Sailors who tried to douse it were engulfed. It was delivered through bronze projector tubes mounted on the Dromon's prow and directed at enemy ships at close range. In 672 AD, when Arab fleets besieged Constantinople, Byzantine Dromons carrying Greek fire met them on the water and drove them back. A later attack by a Rus fleet in 941 AD was similarly destroyed. Byzantine commanders reportedly placed additional siphons amidships and astern to widen the weapon's arc when the enemy outnumbered them severely. The Dromon and Greek fire together kept Constantinople unconquered for nearly 800 years. The Dromon's dominance lasted 5 centuries before the medieval world just lost the recipe. Ship of the line. The ship of the line carried 100 guns across 3 decks. When all of them fired simultaneously, the broadside weighed over half a ton of iron. Anything within range simply ceased to exist. The ship of the line was the capital warship of the 17th through early 19th centuries. A massive 3-masted wooden fortress displaying 1,300 to 2,200 tons, crewed by 600 to 800 men. It was arranged in gun decks stacked from the waterline upward. The bottom deck mounted the heaviest guns, firing 32 to 48-pound iron balls. The middle deck fired 18 to 24-pound shots. The upper deck carried lighter guns and swivel pieces. Opposing fleets formed single columns, lines stretching up to 12 miles, and sailed parallel to each other, each ship firing its full broadside into the opposing vessel. The tactic was known as line of battle warfare, and it required ships powerful enough and stable enough to give and take punishment while maintaining formation. Only ships with sufficient gun weights earned the designation. At Trafalgar in 1805, Admiral Nelson broke the enemy line with 2 columns, crossing perpendicular to the Franco-Spanish formation. He delivered raking broadsides, firing the length of enemy ships bow to stern, where guns could not bear to reply. A single raking broadside from HMS Victory through the stern of the French flagship Bucentaure killed or wounded an estimated 200 to 400 men in a single pass. The combined Franco-Spanish fleet lost 22 ships. The British lost none. Ships that could not stand in the line did not belong in the battle at all. HMS Dreadnought. In February 1906, the Royal Navy launched HMS Dreadnought, a warship that made every other battleship in the world obsolete, including most of its own fleet. HMS Dreadnought was built in 1 year and 1 day at Portsmouth. She displaced 18,000 tons, stretched 526 feet, and carried 10 12-inch guns in 5 twin turrets. Previous battleships carried 4 heavy guns, complemented by a mixed secondary battery of smaller calibers. Dreadnought carried nothing but heavy guns. The term for this was all big gun, and it meant every shot she fired hit with maximum force. Every range calculation was consistent, and her fire control was unified in a way no mixed battery ship could match. Her Parsons steam turbines gave her 21 knots, faster than any existing battleship could follow. The reaction was immediate and global. Germany, the United States, Japan, France, and Italy all began emergency dreadnought programs within months. Within a decade, over 120 dreadnoughts had been launched worldwide. The Anglo-German naval arms race that followed poured national budgets into competing fleets of the new class and contributed directly to the diplomatic tensions that led to the First World War. There was an irony in what Admiral Fisher had built. By making every pre-dreadnought obsolete, he had erased Britain's existing advantage. The Royal Navy's enormous lead in pre-dreadnought battleships meant nothing after February 1906. Every nation started fresh in the same race. Britain had a lead of 1. Dreadnought's most famous wartime act came not in a fleet engagement, but in March 1915, when she rammed and sank the German submarine U-29, becoming the only battleship in history to sink a submarine by ramming. The ship rewrote the rules of naval warfare, but it never fought the war those rules helped start. German U-boat. Winston Churchill wrote that only one thing truly frightened him during the entire Second World War: the U-boats. Germany's undersea boats came within reach of forcing Britain into defeat through arithmetic. Britain is an island. Everything is needed. Food, oil, weapons, reinforcements crossed the Atlantic by ship. Admiral Karl Donitz calculated that 300 operational U-boats could starve Britain into submission. He rarely had more than 30 at sea at any given time, and he nearly did anyway. Donitz developed the Wolf Pack. U-boats spread in patrol lines across the Atlantic. When one detected a convoy, it radioed position coordinates without attacking. Others converged. At nightfall, they surfaced and struck simultaneously from multiple directions. Multiple explosions in multiple quadrants paralyzed escort response. During what German submarines called the happy time, each boat at sea averaged 8 merchant ships sunk per month. By the war's end, U-boats had destroyed approximately 2,825 merchant vessels and 175 warships. More than 30,000 Allied merchant sailors died crossing the Atlantic. The campaign was ultimately broken by Allied code-breaking, long-range aircraft, and improved escort tactics. May 1943 became Black May, when 41 U-boats were destroyed in a single month, and Donitz withdrew his fleet. Of the roughly 40,000 men who served in the U-boat arm, 28,000 were killed. 3 and 4 did not return. The weapon that nearly starved Britain destroyed its own crews at a higher rate than it destroyed the enemy. Aircraft carrier. On June 4, 1942, 2 fleets fought one of the most consequential naval battles in history. They never saw each other. That was the aircraft carrier's defining fact. The aircraft carrier ended the battleship's 400 years of dominance in the time it took dive bombers to fall from altitude to impact. At the Battle of Midway, American and Japanese carrier strike groups fought entirely through launched aircraft, striking targets 200 miles away across the open ocean. Not a single surface gun was fired between capital ships. 4 Japanese fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, were sunk in the space of 2 days. Japan's offensive power in the Pacific was broken. The carrier's revolution was conceptual as much as technological. Every previous warship had been a weapon itself. Floating guns, rams, torpedo tubes. The carrier was a floating airport. Its weapon was distance. It could project destruction from beyond the horizon, striking targets it could not see and could not be struck by in return. The battleship, no matter how many guns it carried, had to close within visual range. The carrier never did. At the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944, American carrier aircraft shot down approximately 600 Japanese planes in a single day. An engagement so one-sided it became known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. By the end of the war, the battleship had been reduced to an escort and shore-but barbed platform. Every major navy in the world reorganized around that fact and has not reorganized since. Nuclear ballistic missile submarine. Somewhere beneath the ocean, a submarine is on patrol right now. Its exact position is unknown to every government except its own. It carries enough nuclear warheads to destroy dozens of cities. It has been there for decades. The ballistic missile submarine was designed around a single strategic concept: second strike survivability. If an adversary launched a nuclear first strike and destroyed every missile silo, every bomber base, and every military installation it could locate, submarines already at sea would remain undetected. already loaded, already aimed. The enemy could never be certain it had eliminated the response. That uncertainty was the deterrent. America's Ohio class, commissioned from 1981 onward, represents the current peak of this logic. Each boat is 560 feet long, displaces 20,700 tons submerged, and carries 20 Trident II D5 ballistic missiles. Each Trident II can carry up to 8 independently targetable nuclear warheads with a yield of up to 475 kilotons, roughly 30 times the destructive power of the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. A single Ohio-class submarine on patrol carries enough warheads to strike 160 separate targets simultaneously from any ocean on Earth, with a range exceeding 7,000 miles. During a 70 to 90-day patrol, the submarine operates under strict emissions control. It receives communications, but does not transmit. To transmit would be to reveal its position. The Trident II D5 has completed over 180 consecutive successful test launches. No other ballistic missile in the world, land or sea-based, comes close to that record. The Cold War ended. The submarines are still there. Gerald R. Ford-class aircraft carrier. The Gerald R. Ford class is 1,106 feet long, displaces over 110,000 tons, and costs $13.3 billion. It is the largest warship ever built. It is also, by every meaningful measure, the most capable instrument of naval power in human history. The Ford class replaced the Nimitz-class carriers that had served as the backbone of American naval power since 1975. Its two A-1B nuclear reactors generate 3 times the electrical power of the Nimitz-class reactors, enough to power a city, with capacity reserved for directed energy weapons not yet deployed. They will never need refueling across a projected 50-year service life, eliminating the 4-year, multi-billion-dollar refueling overhauls Nimitz-class carriers required at midlife. The flight deck uses an electromagnetic aircraft launch system in place of the steam catapults that had flung aircraft into the air since the 1950s. Instead of an explosive burst of steam pressure, the system uses a linear induction motor to accelerate aircraft along a 330-foot track. It reduces structural stress on airframes. It enables the launch of a wider range of aircraft weights, including future unmanned combat drones. The Ford class can generate 25% more sorties per day than its predecessor, with 25% fewer crew members. The carrier deploys as the center of a carrier strike group, a force of cruisers, destroyers, submarines, and supply ships capable of sustained combat operations anywhere on Earth, with no host nation required. The United States currently operates 11 such groups. Every major navy on Earth has studied the carrier strike group model for 80 years. None has built a competing one.